Okay, so this is entirely based on a research project on how people talk within therapeutic community group meetings. So these are parts of the clips that we will be seeing today, and as you can see, they are slightly anonymized to preserve people. Come on in. Hi.
Sorry, we went to the other venue.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay.
Is there anyone else in there? It's just you. Across the.
No, we've given a previous venue across the river, different building.
Oh, no. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll just press on. We have just really started. Okay. So today, what we will be looking at is we will be watching some video clips from real therapeutic community meetings that I have recorded in the course of this research project. And one goal for today is to learn in a way how to spot emerging signs of a possible conflict arising within the group. It can be a conflict between the clients or between a client and a facilitator, a staff member. Okay. And also reflect on how it is different ways of navigating conflict. Okay, so how to manage it when it emerges, sometimes how to preempt it before a conversation gets into a full-blown conflict, and how to de-escalate conflict as well. Okay, and today I'm using a training method called conversational analytic role-play method. I have a small video explaining the approach, so we are going to watch this next. Oh, the audio's not working. It was working, wasn't it?
Conversational analytic role-play method.
Oh, there you go.
It's an approach to communication skills training that can be adapted to any sort of workplace or institutional encounter. Traditional methods for training and assessing communication skills are based in role play or simulation. CARM is totally different to this. The conversation analytic part of CARM is conversation analysis, or CA. CA has a strong track record in delivering insights into how talk works, which, in turn, inform practice and policy interventions. Loughborough has one of the largest concentrations of experts in conversation analysis in the world. CA involves collecting a large number of audio or video recordings of naturally occurring conversation in workplace or domestic settings. The data are transcribed and analysed using a technical system that permits a forensic analysis of the constituent activities that comprise the complete interaction. It can be useful to think of a conversation in terms of a racetrack or course, with a distinct landscape. You start at the beginning with your recipient or recipients, and, along the way, you complete various projects. You anticipate and avoid hurdles, or you construct hurdles that can then knock the interaction off course. For example, telephone calls between an organisation and a client or potential client may involve projects such as opening the call, explaining the reason for the call, explaining problems, explaining services, asking questions, offering services or advice, making appointments, and closing the call. CA focuses on how those projects are designed and how different designs can lead to different conversational trajectories or outcomes, either avoiding or crashing into the racetrack's hurdles. For instance, explaining a service one way may lead to higher client uptake than when it's explained another way. It can be the difference between winning or losing the race. CARM helps people to understand the landscape of their particular workplace or professional racetrack. A lot of research on communication doesn't start where CA starts, with an analysis of people actually doing their job. Instead, it asks people to reflect on what they do, or to report on it. This leaves the landscape and organisation of the racetrack itself completely unstudied, or, to use another analogy, it leaves the actual interaction in an unanalysed interactional black box. CARM works by turning analyses of racetracks into evidence-based training materials. Workshop participants can then effectively live through the same projects and hurdles as those in the recorded materials that they're listening to or watching. Training participants are exposed, often uniquely in their careers, to the actual activities of anonymised colleagues doing the job that participants themselves do, usually from an organisation based in some other part of the country. Because of the way CARM works, they're able to identify the practices that work and those that don't work. We noted earlier that traditional methods for training and assessing communication skills are based in role play or simulation. One of the problems with simulation is that people often do things in training that they don't do in real encounters. In our research, we found that people make explicit or exaggerate the things that they know should be in their encounters, according to what the training guidelines say. Guidelines for interaction themselves can be problematic, as they're often based on a stereotypical rather than scientific understanding of conversation and what works. So people may do things to, say, develop rapport that sound clunky and unnatural compared to more subtle and effective rapport building in real encounters. We also found that actors playing the part of one party often did things that real parties didn't. That's because they can, because the consequences for them are not as they would be in a real encounter. It's a bit like speaking to someone in an organisation and feeling that you can hear the organisational agenda or that person's training in your conversation. You're not being talked to as an individual, but being talked at as the recipient of a workplace script for dealing with people like you. In contrast, CARM uses anonymised video or audio recordings of actual encounters between members of the public and organisations, or between professionals in their workplace, as the basis for training, all underpinned by research that has identified the important trainables.
Okay, come on in.
Very sorry for disturbing you.
Okay, so just to pick up on a couple of basic points. This is not great, is it? Okay. Alright, so rather than using invented, made-up examples or role plays, we will be watching real examples, real conversations, and trying to live through the difficulties and tensions that those real people in my recordings were experiencing. Another point in this video, Liz talks about identifying effective communication practices that can lead to a desired outcome. And she's worked a lot on sales encounters, so in a way the outcome is really easy. Yeah, it's still, we've still got that problem. Thank you for. And in a sales encounter, it's relatively easy to figure out whether you've been able to sell the product or not. I take it that things are a bit more complicated in health and social care, where the outcome is not always obvious, and the provider and the client may have different ideas and understandings about what is desirable. There are often conflicts of values and goals in a way. However, today I'm largely assuming that some of the conflicts we are going to witness in a way are not desirable as such, because they can be very disputatious, acrimonious, they can compromise the therapeutic relationship. So it might be useful to identify effective ways of managing them or preempting them. However, I'm not proposing that conflict as such is negative. We know that it can be positive, can lead to change in the culture of an organization or society at large. Okay, so the therapeutic communities I involved in my research are located in this geographical area. It's the north of Italy. That's where I collected these recordings. Okay, and the staff members had a background in psychology and social work and education, and the clients were all recovering from drug misuse, but sometimes had other diagnoses such as mental health issues. Some were on probation as well. So as we all know, theses are based on the principle of living together and learning from that experience, and that means that a lot of tensions and conflicts arise on a daily basis. In the thesis where I did my research, it was not uncommon for clients to find someone else's behavior offensive, Some clients were given responsibility in the management of the house, and so they were also doing some kind of informal mentoring of more junior clients that also led to tensions and conflicts. And of course, the staff members were tasked with monitoring and supervising the clients, including making sure that their behaviors abided by rules and norms of conduct, and that also led to misunderstandings and tensions and conflicts as well. And these were often discussed in the weekly group meetings. So when I talked to the staff about how they experience conflict, they said that they were often frustrating. Sometimes they could compromise the therapeutic relationship. They were really hard to manage, and in some situations they could experience a communication breakdown. So they did not have the feeling that. Oh,
Hi,
come on in.
we're late.
That's
We
all
went
right.
to a different campus.
We were sent to the Frampton Wilkins building.
We went across river and back across river.
Yes, same one.
So, sorry, you went to the.
Frampton Wilkins building.
Yes.
So we asked. I'm so sorry. We did ask to be sent around again to emphasise it was at the Strand.
Got you.
I'm
Well,
so sorry.
we're here now. That's the main thing. Sorry.
It's all right. Yeah. We're still at the introduction. Welcome everybody. Okay. Okay. So in terms of conflict. Okay. Sometimes when we are talking with clients, things happen very quickly, and we don't always have the time to stop and think in a way. And one thing that I have observed, sometimes we have a tendency to use the same solutions over and over. If a solution hasn't worked to solve a problem, sometimes we try more of the same. Maybe we upgrade or intensify the same solution rather than exploring alternatives. What we are trying to do today is to see how videoing interactions can be useful to go back, reflect, and consider alternatives, things that we could have done differently. And we can also learn that sometimes conflicts have got some recurring patterns. There are some signs that we can spot early on that we might be going in a direction where a conflict might be emerging within the group meeting. Okay. So I will be working through 5 cases. If we don't have time for all 5 cases, doesn't really matter. But what I'm going to do is to play the video clips, so which are subtitled in English because the people's original language is Italian. So you'll be able to follow the subtitles. I will also summarize and explain what the people in videos are talking about. And so we are going to live through their experience in real time, in a way, as if we were there, and I will stop the clips at critical points where something happens. A conflict is about to emerge or has emerged, and then we will have a think about what will we do in those circumstances, and so we will experience effectively the group member's problem, which is, so what do I do now? Then I will play the rest of the clip, and we will be able to compare our solutions to what the people in the recordings did in those real-life examples. So, to reiterate, our goals are to spot signs of emerging conflict and reflect on alternative ways of managing, de-escalating, or sometimes preventing a conflict altogether. Okay, just checking the time. So, can I just ask if a person is here who was planning on giving a future presentation after this? Yes. Okay. So can I check with Janelle? If we stop this at 3:30, we have a bit of a comfort break in the middle. Okay, and then we have the
time to get online because I
yes.
still need to push it online and it's a Google presentation.
Okay.
So there's a few.
So you could check it. You could test it
about 10 minutes
in the
to
break,
organize. Yeah, lovely.
and then at 3:30 we can hit the ground running and watch a presentation. Would that be okay? Okay. Excellent. So let's press on and consider case 1. Okay, so what we are going to see here is how a conflict emerges effectively between a staff member and a client who are in a group meeting within the therapeutic community. Okay, so some background. We have a staff member, I'm calling Gianni, the name I invented, and the client I'm calling Igor. So some context you need to understand this example is that this client is on probation, so he's doing the therapeutic program as an alternative to detention effectively. He's coming towards the end of his therapeutic program at the same time, and the program is residential. Okay, so we are coming in at a point at the meeting where it's not the start of the meeting. We have been talking about various issues, and the client has been making jokes about a popular Italian saint, Padre Pio, and the joke was that the saint was sentenced to detention at this point. I'm going to remind you when it will be relevant to remember this detail. It's a detail we need to understand what will happen. But I will remind you. So at the start, we will be seeing the staff member criticizing the client for an inappropriate behavior, or using his words, attitude, including these jokes, okay, which are taken to undermine the importance of the meeting and more broadly the therapeutic work that the staff members are trying to promote in the therapeutic community. So this is the group meeting. So people sit around, big table, and the protagonists of this episode are the staff member here and the client here. Okay, so let's volume. You might be hearing a hiss provisionally. Now I'll turn it down again. See if it works, and you will be able to follow the subtitles. I will be playing the audio as well, so you can feel the tone of the conversation, and there will be an escalation at some point, so people raising the volume of their voices, and even if you don't know the language, you will be able to understand that something is going on. Okay. Okay, let me... Oh, do we have to keep doing this for the entire session? Okay, not a problem. Okay, so what happens at the start is that he calls the client by name, and the way we transcribe conversations are done in such a way as we display silences in tens of seconds, and this is going to be important in a moment. Okay, I really can't stand this attitude of the last few days anymore, so I take this to be a complaint against the client. Okay, he's being told off by the staff member, and have told you already that we have no obligation to keep you here. Okay, so this is a bit of a warning at the same time that if the client does not adjust his attitude, it might be expelled from the program. And what the client does is, well, he doesn't really respond to this bit of a warning, but goes back to the complaint and he asks, so what kind of attitude are you talking about? What do you mean? And in order to track the conversation, so we have that Gianni does a bit of a complaint, and a useful way of thinking about the communication is in terms of moves. If I do a first move, I provide for you, I create the expectation of some kind of response. And in this case, the staff member is telling someone off, giving him a bit of a warning. So I think the expectation is that the client acknowledges that something has gone wrong and possibly commits to changing his attitude, but he does not do so, and rather requests a clarification of the complaint. So what kind of attitude are you talking about? And the complaint is one of the strongest accusations I have in all my recordings. So Gianni kind of takes responsibility for it. He does not invoke rules or regulations. He says, I'm sick of this. I can't stand this anymore. And he characterizes the client in negative terms about bad attitude, and he warns him of negative consequences. This is worth keeping in mind. Okay, a fairly aggravated initial complaint. So Igor, the client, has asked the staff member to explain what he means. So this is what happens next. Okay. So this is how Gianni clarifies, in a way, your attitude you've had in the last few days. It's really started to be annoying. What we can notice actually is that he does not clarify what he's talking about. It kind of relies on the client to, understand what kind of attitude the staff member is talking about. Let's see that you change soon. This was a rather literal translation from the Italian. Does not really translate in English, but what he means is see that you change soon. There's only a few days left, a reference to the fact that the client will be going home soon, and he should not spoil the very end for himself. So this is a bit of an order, a directive, a command, and again a bit of a warning. You could spoil things for yourself. Okay, otherwise you could end up like Padre Pio. So this is the joke I had mentioned earlier. So the staff member is basically making a reference to this client's joke that the saint was sentenced to detention. What this actually means, it is a reference to the fact that if the client does not behave, he might be expelled from the TC, and therefore he will have to go to prison, effectively. So
so the TC is an alternative to prison, is it?
For some clients, not all of the clients, but they welcome people as on probation. Yes, but some clients are there for a more standard kind of.
But if this chap's expelled from the TC, he will automatically go to prison.
I don't think the process is automatic, but there's that. For example, the social workers might decide to transfer the client to another TC, I think, but there's the possibility that for inappropriate conduct they might actually have to go to prison. But this is the way it's being talked about here. Okay, so we are still there. The client asked him to clarify, and this is what the staff member did. And in terms of early signs of conflict, it's really important to spot those requests for clarification. So there is a complaint and someone asks, what do you mean? Can you explain that? We will see that in the other examples later as well. And one thing about these requests, they can be a bit dangerous, because one thing that can happen, if you explain the complaint more clearly, well, you can end up making a more serious complaint against the person, and therefore you can, in a way, help the conversation move towards conflict, which might not be what the staff member is trying to do at all. He's trying to get the client he's trying to teach him a lesson, in a way, about appropriate attitude. So what the staff member decides to do is to produce a new version of his complaint and his warning, and in this way he reiterates the expectation that the client provides a positive response. For example, by saying, "Okay, all right, I take the message. I'll try to change," something like that. Or something happens, something different happens. Oh yes, I should have turned on the volume again. Turn it down now. play that again, actually. Okay, so what the client does, he points to the camera, the camera with which I am recording the meeting, okay, and says, so film this. It means he's challenging the staff member to keep filming the scene, meaning, okay, we've got this on record, what you're doing, and then he goes, threats, which it can be translated with, you're threatening me. So what we have here is that rather than collaborating with the staff member's project, the client starts complaining against the staff member. You're threatening me. So this is a point where we are on the verge of an emerging conflict. Somebody complains and the other person comes back with what I'm calling a counter-complaint. Okay, so both complaining against each other, actually. This is a crucial point. We will see that in other examples as well. So rather than responding to the complaint, ego produces his own complaint. And at that point, both have the same project in a way. Everyone is trying to complain against the other. So how do you get out of that, in a way? Okay, so how would you manage the situation? Could you discuss saying, take 3 minutes with the people near you in pairs of threesomes about what you would do in this particular case if you were a staff member. Try to identify with the staff member in this case, and then we'll see what happened in the real case. Let's just take 3 minutes. It's all right. Let's see what happens next. So, just to give you a bit of a spoiler, this staff member, in this case, Gianni, is not going to acknowledge the client's perspective. This is why I have this as a first example. It's an escalated conflict, and it happens precisely, in part, because there's no acknowledgement of each other's perspective. Okay.
Non mi fate minacce?
Assolutamente.
Io le faccio le minacce.
Non sto minacciando nessuno, ti sto
Io
dicendo
le
che
mai fatte,
l'atteggiamento.
tutto quel che è su carta, se puttanate.
Don't panic, I'll explain more. This is what conflict sequences look like. People start talking in overlap. So what, with the kind of transcription that we use, we have these square brackets to show that people are starting to talk simultaneously. Okay? So what it's like, it seems complicated, but at the end of the day, if we break it down, it's quite simple. The staff member is trying to say no, absolutely not. I'm not threatening anyone. So he's kind of rejecting the client's point of view altogether, which is a bit of a tricky thing to do, because there was evidence that what the staff member was doing could be interpreted as a threat. You know, going back to prison, it's a consequence. And in the meantime, the client is starting these rhetorical questions. Have I ever threatened anyone? I've never threatened. I don't do that. And what he means by that is, from his perspective, because he's never threatened anyone in the TEC, it's unfair that he's being threatened. So he's maintaining that he's being threatened. He's carrying on his project of complaining against the staff member, and he's not responding to the staff member anymore at this point, which might be what the staff members I talked with during my research experienced as a communication breakdown, people not responding to each other anymore. And what does the staff member do? I'm telling you that your attitude. So he's trying to stick with his own project. So we have both people trying to advance their own project without mediation or acknowledgement of the other person's point of view. And there you go. The staff member rejecting the client's perspective, the client effectively carrying on with his complaint, and then Gianni trying to go back to his own complaint. And there are signs of an emerging escalation here by way of, the client comes in a bit early, starts to talk whilst the staff member is still talking. And at some point, and there is escalation, I use the capital letters to display people using a higher volume of voice, really, okay, increased amplitude. And at this point, the client is also starting to interrupt the staff member while he's still talking. So what happened in a way? So the staff member decided to reject the client's perspective altogether and go back to his initial complaint. So they're both complaining about each other at this point. So, but in a way, the third move, after somebody complains and the other counter complains, that the third move is really where the conflict properly starts, because we can see at that point that both people are not willing to listen to each other, as it were, and the staff member rejects the client's perspective while the client tries to support his own position. So, and there is no compromise in a way. And going back to your contribution, there could be a way of framing the two projects as compatible. I acknowledge your point of view, but my point of view is also important. This is not what they are doing for whatever reason. It's a bit of a zero-sum game, You can only win at the expense of the other, losing the game as a metaphor. Obviously, they're not playing a game. Okay, so these were early signs of possible conflict. Is if you do have strong initial complaint, but people are kind of sensitive and don't like to receive that kind of being told off, particularly in front of an audience in a group situation. And another sign of a bit of a problem is resistance to responding. Those silences that we saw at the start, where the client was not really responding and taking time in a way, whereas things became much quicker at the end. And what escalates conflict, it really seems to be in my research, lack of recognition of the other's position and rather trying to stick to one's own project. But you'll be surprised, people do this very often. It's kind of easy retrospectively to say, well, they should have done that, and it's really useful. For some reason, when we are in the middle, in the heat of the situation, sometimes you don't think and stop, you react. This happens on more than one occasion. Okay, so this was a case of a complaint followed by a counter complaint and then getting into escalated complaints. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the third one, and we're going to see a different way of managing the situation. So this is a case recorded in a different therapeutic community, and it involves a discussion on CARM. Okay, so we have a client, I'm calling him Dennis, and Sandro, a staff member. Okay, they have been, the group has been discussing some jokes that people have been doing and that and other people taking offense, basically. And somebody who's not at the meeting punched a hole into Dennis's cap. I don't know why, but they are talking about it. It was possibly a joke of sorts, and at the start, we are going to see the staff member is telling the clients they should avoid making these bad jokes that others might regard as offensive. Okay, so slightly off camera, the staff member and the client is going to appear, I think, on this corner. We'll see in a moment. This is the person who was setting up the camera. So we are at the start of the meeting.
Se io faccio una battuta, anche fuori posto, perché posso sbagliarti sia pensando che la conosco di meno, e lei mi dà fastidio che si guarda, non fanno sulle battute che mi danno fastidio. Io non se lo faccio da chiudere. Non vuol dire che io l'ho fatto apposta.
Okay, let's go through it. Okay. For example, I, the staff member, only take the liberty of making a joke with the people that I use this for. He says something that I can't quite hear on the recording, so probably the people I know. But if I make a joke, say with Arianna, a staff member, she's in the room, a joke which can be out of place because I can make a mistake, and the joke can turn out to be heavy, or with Marta, other staff member, the person who was setting up the camera. I know her less, and she might get annoyed, and she might tell me, "Look, Sandro, his name, do me a favor, don't make those kinds of jokes with me because they bother me, so I don't do those jokes anymore." It doesn't mean that I did that on purpose. So he's trying to educate the clients on respect and being careful with jokes that other people might take offense on. And the client is going to come in at this point. Oh, there, sorry. Dennis, there you go. Okay, so in context, this is a complaint. They have been discussing about the problem that somebody punched a hole into his cab as a joke. And what the client is saying here, the same thing applies to me, meaning somebody, did a joke, I took offense, he's going to carry on complaining about the fact that he was not defended, nobody apologized, his cab has been damaged. Okay, so he's doing the initial complaint in this case, that he's being treated unfairly.
No, perché sì.
Okay, so we are seeing a similar scenario in a way as the previous case, with the staff member saying no, and the client going yeah, and the staff member no, and the client yeah. So what's going on here? We're going to find out in a moment. But for some reason, the staff member is rejecting the client's perspective that he has a legitimate complaint to bring to the group. Okay, stop me if it's unclear. I realize that there's a lot of context. These are very specific conversation in another language. There's a lot of background knowledge that those people are sharing. Okay, just put your hand up if anything is less than clear. Okay, and this is what happens next. Oh, the client is upholding his position, something we've already seen before. Okay, so what we learn here is that when this episode occurred, the client, Dennis, shouted at the staff member. So there was a bit of a quarrel when this joke happened, and apparently this client himself behaved inappropriately. I take it that he got really angry and he started shouting because he was angry because somebody had damaged his possessions, and so he shouted at the staff member. And so the staff member is saying, there was no chance of having a reasonable conversation. So, it's not a legitimate complaint. So we are back but this is the same pattern. You have somebody complaining, and rather than saying, okay, tell me more about that, what happened, you go, no, it's your fault in a way. So, same scenario as before, with two people having the same kind of project complaint, counter complaint. Okay, a bit of an emerging conflict. We know that what happens next is the crucial moment where the conflict can escalate. Okay, so Dennis complaining, and another staff member undermining his complaints, not acknowledging his perspective, and we have already seen that it's a really tricky thing to do, but it happens in more than one case. So what happens next?
Esagerare a volte con le parole, anche quello lo sono, ammetto, perché è la verità. Però il fatto che non c'è, per dirti, non si è neanche scusato, perché io comunque, anche se noi siamo amici per quello che siamo, non mi permetterei mai neanche di toccarti una sigaretta, di farti spostarti una ciabatta, di fare qualche cazzato del genere.
Okay, so what the client, I'm going to read this in a moment, what he's doing here is he makes a bit of an admission in this case. So he's accommodating. more than the staff member so far. Sometimes I exaggerate with the things that I say. I know that. I admit that. It's the truth. But the fact is, he did not even apologize. You know, that the person who did the offense was not at the meeting. Because although we are friends with that person, I mean, I would never allow myself to touch one of your cigarettes or move one of your slippers, you know, or do some bullshit like that. So, and this is a very common way for people to complain. They say, you know, he did that. I would never do that. So he's kind of portraying himself as, you know, somebody who knows how to behave, and that makes it even more unfair. It's the same thing we saw in the first case. You're threatening me. I've never threatened anyone. Okay. So we are here. He is upholding his complaint. Okay. We see that people who complain and have not their complaint unacknowledged, they usually stick to that, and you know, they try to get their perspective through and have it accepted. So, any idea what the staff member could do in this particular case? And rather than discussing in groups, can you just shout out ideas?
Acknowledge that he's got a legitimate cause for being aggrieved. That, you know, having a hole punched in your hat isn't a good joke.
Yeah. So acknowledge his position. We are back at that. Yeah, that seems to be the solution we have in mind. Any other things?
Reinforce that you just complained in quite a good way.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't necessarily shout or put, you know, he didn't do that in the first place. So my better say, Dennis, is completely legitimate. Maybe if you'd done that yesterday, this would be solved by now.
Yeah. Showing that he can be reasonable, admit to his wrongdoings or criticizable behaviors.
He could apologise, the staff member,
Yeah.
for
For what?
for interrupting him, shouting at him, and not letting him make his point.
So within the meeting, here and now, there and then. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Io ti avevo richiamato un sacco di volte perché prendevi le cose degli altri.
È successo una volta che sono arrivato, che è successo con la figlia.
Sono riflessioni sui chiamati.
So what happens is that sometimes people can get into a bit of a symmetrical back and forth of complaints, counter-complaints, and rejections of whatever the other is saying. And the staff member goes, "Oh, what are you talking about? I had pulled you up many times because you were taking other people's things. What do you mean you don't allow yourself? You do that?" And the client, "It happened once," which is a very common way of responding to a complaint. You know, it happened once. I had just arrived, you know, I was a newbie, so I didn't know the regulations. That's the kind of thing he's suggesting. And he says, it happened once with this particular client, Adamo. And the staff member goes, and with another client as well. So, you took his slippers. Okay. So, we are getting into that back and forth. We are going to see that this episode is not going to end as the previous one, though. That's why I've got this example to show a different pattern. But they're moving towards an escalation, effectively. Okay? Complaining and counter-complaining. So that's where we are, where the client is complaining and being pushed into a corner and starting to defend himself, which is not conducive to, for example, being critical. You know, you're defending yourself rather than reflecting back on your behavior, which he had started to do. I've skipped a bit because it's very long, but what happens next is that the client protests that he had not damaged the person's slippers. If he took the slippers but didn't damage them, thus reiterating his complaint. You know, I've not damaged anyone's possessions, but somebody damaged mine. Okay, so that client makes a joke about his slippers actually being damaged, possibly to diffuse the conflict. You get cases sometimes where others come in and try to, with a bit of a joke. And the staff member announces a change in the topic. Anyway, today we will be having a meeting that goes beyond Venice, because we did not want to start with this. So he tries to move on, and that's one way that people sometimes get out of conflicts. They just suspend them without getting to any kind of agreement. But the client is going to stick to his point and not, is not going to change, to let the staff member change the topic.
Io alla fine della fiera mi devo tenere il cappello bucato e non mi devo neanche prendere le scuse, neanche posso andare a parlarci. Se a te sembra giusto una cosa del genere, va bene.
Okay, so, all right then. At the end of the day, I have to keep a cap with a hole in it, and I can't get an apology. I can't talk to him. I take it that Dennis is doing the residential program, so he can't get out. I think the other person might have been somebody who was visiting. Sometimes they have clients doing semi-residential, so they come in on certain days. But I don't know for certain. But he can talk to this person anyway. And if you think this is fair, all right then. So we have one. But he's doing more than one thing. But one thing he's doing, he's starting to complain about the staff member. Before he was complaining about somebody else. Now he's complaining about the staff member for being unfair. If you think this is fair. So he's not having his complaint taken seriously, and he reproduces the complaint, and this kind of resets the scene, brings it back to the beginning. One thing I find often in conflicts is that people keep reiterating their point, so there is no progression in a way. They keep circling and going back to their initial point. So there has been no progress, but the scene is even worse because he started to complain about the staff member. But this gives the staff member another opportunity to maybe do something different. So he does a bit of a I take it's a bit of a sarcastic comment. I don't know if you agree with that. That's my analysis of it. And he asks another client to apologize to Dennis. This client is present in the room, and it was I take it he was involved in the event. And this client apologizes. Okay, so that client apologizes, and I don't know who he is, but he's in the room. And Dennis goes, but it was not his fault. It was the other person's fault, the person who's not here. And the staff member goes, all right. And then you could have told me, for fuck's sake, leave him alone. You, the staff member, could have told that guy, leave me alone. So he rejects the solution that the staff member had kind of proposed, having someone apologize to Dennis, and then he kind of upgrades his complaint, actually. And to be fair, the nature of the staff member solution was a bit, I don't know quite how to put it, and I always make sure that I'm not judging the people in the recording because they allowed me to record them in the first place, so it's not fair. However, there is something, there's a concessionary element to it, but it's quite dismissive, okay, let's apologize to him and let's move on. It's not really taking the client's perspective into serious consideration. But this is and there is a strong potential for escalation at this point. And the client can be seen to be a bit agitated, understandably, probably.
Non si permetta fare queste cose qua. Sì.
At this point, the staff member changes tack, and he says later. So he's starting to. I think he was. This is. I use the symbol for when people cut off later. He was starting, I think, to say later I will talk to this person, but he corrects himself and say, I cannot call him now. We don't know why, but for some reason he can't talk to this person now. But next time I will tell him. I actually told him that he does not dare to do these things. So at this point, he's starting to make a bit of a concession and suggest that next time he will talk to this client. Actually, he's already talked to this person and told him he did not have to do that. So he's making a small step towards Dennis in recognition of his perspective and what happens next. So he backtracks a bit. This is what happens here. So Dennis further complains that the other client should have punched a hole into his own clothes rather than his cap. But he does not complain about the staff member anymore. And then Sandro starts to make a more general recommendation about avoiding jokes, which was how we started with in a way. And then he successfully changes the topic. So this, you will not regard this as best practice, but it is what I was able to record, and it is evidence that if you make a move to now acknowledge the client's position, that actually leads to de-escalation and exit from an emerging conflict. And we are going, okay, I'm thinking 10 minutes comfort break, and then watch the other two cases. So far, we have focused on let's try and spot early signs of emerging conflict. And a useful way of thinking about conversations is people having different projects. A staff member comes in, he has to start a meeting, and maybe in his mind is going, this client is not behaving properly, I should let him know. But sometimes things go wrong and people don't collaborate with each other's projects, but rather there's a bit of a clash, competing projects. So there are ways of recognizing when it happens. But first of all, if a therapist or facilitator starts off with a bit of an aggravated complaint in front of an audience, well, that does not always land well. And signs that the client is not taking it well is emerging silences, where the client is taking time and not really responding. When the client asks, so tell me more about that, that can be a tricky thing to reply to and sort of thinking about. And what actually de-escalates conflicts when so this is going to come online in a second. Well, we've said that it's starting to recognize the other's position, and so taking a step back from one's own project in a way. And there is evidence from the research that it helps de-escalate. The next example, we are going to see something slightly different. So far, we have seen escalated conflicts. It is also possible to spot an emerging conflict and do something before it actually starts, but when it's on the verge, in a way of starting. So if you remember, I told you that it's the third move that's really critical. So if somebody complains, somebody counter-complains, when you get to that point, it is possible to do something different rather than getting into an escalated situation. So this is going to be shorter. It's an audio clip because in this particular case, people didn't want to be filmed. It's also possible to do audio recordings of group meetings. Obviously, if you lose something, visual conduct, body behavior. So we have a staff member, a woman, this time, Morena, and a young client. This is a daycare, a non-residential TC, okay? There has been an ongoing discussion in this case on the staff members' view that the clients should confront each other a bit more. And it is part of the therapeutic community process that there is a bit of an expectation that everybody will contribute to each other's learning and recovery. And the problem here is that one of the clients, Samuele, a young man, always arrives late in the morning. This is not residential, so all the clients go home and stay with their parents or other supporters. Okay, and it's the staff members' view that the other clients should tell him something, rather than just wait for the staff members to tell him that he should arrive early in the morning, on time. Okay, so we don't have the video on this one.
C'è un documento, per esempio, che lo possa aiutare perché arrivi prima, o qualcosa che gli faccia capire, cavolo, io vengo qua, tutti vengono qua, vengo qua.
Okay, this is the staff member speaking. Okay, let's think about something different. Let's something we can do about this problem to help him, okay, so that he arrives on time, basically. Or something that helps him understand, blimey, I get here at 8:30. You come here at 9:15. Who are you? So she's enacting what a client could say, okay? So she's kind of advising, a bit more than advising, she's inciting the clients to, tell something to the guy who arrives late every morning.
Ma guarda da quanto vuol dire? 6 mesi e pensi che 10 mesi.
Okay, so in the lead up to an emerging conflict, sometimes you find people have been not accusing each other but disagreeing on a subject matter. And so she objects. So she goes, how long have you been here? She addresses the guy who arrives late every morning. And the staff member starts to challenge this. What does this mean? And the client guesses 6 months, and the other client who arrives late every morning says 10 months. 10 months! And so you can see the client's point. So he's been doing that for 10 months, and he expects us to do that. He's been doing that for 10 months. There's also an implication that you've let him do it, and now you expect the clients to do something about it. So you can see competing projects, the staff member has got a project at this point, and Lydia, the young client, is kind of resisting it. Okay, you're going to see a similar sequence as the prior examples. There's going to be a complaint from the staff member towards the client. Okay.
Secondo me è pensato dipende, perché devono sempre essere, adesso non perché voglio scaricare, però può anche essere, perché, no, questo mi non vi rode, allora questa cosa non mi dà fastidio, per esempio, questa cosa.
Okay, let's see what she's doing here. No one has ever thought about, why is it always to be another case where somebody interrupts themselves? But I think she was going to say, why does it have to be the staff members all the time to deal with those problems? It's not that I want to dump this on you. It's not that I want to delegate this problem to the client. So you can see she's sensitive to the kind of criticism that the client is putting forward. He's been here for 6 months, and so the staff member goes, I don't want to delegate the problem to you, but maybe this thing does not annoy you. Maybe it does not bother you. There you go. This is the staff member's complaint, and the complaint is that the clients, they don't care. And just a bit of a spoiler, you're going to see another counter complaint. So it's a familiar sequence, okay?
Non mettere in bocca parole che nessuno ha mai detto.
Okay, don't put words in our mouth. That's what she says. It's not as serious as the first case, but it's similar. In that case, we had, you're threatening me. In this case, something less problematic, but still, don't put words in her mouth.
Does that mean don't tell us what to say?
Thank you for asking that. I thought that was good translation, maybe not. No, it means that she's attributing them something that they're not thinking.
I mean, she's telling them they did something they didn't do, or they said something they didn't say.
So the staff member is saying, maybe you don't care. Maybe you're not bothered. He can arrive late in the morning. You're just not interested. You don't care. And the client goes, don't put words into our mouth. Meaning, don't say what we think. It's not what we think. How would you? Is there an idiomatic expression in English for that?
That makes sense.
Oh, does it? Yeah. Okay. It's okay. Yeah. So, you always go to Urban Dictionary for these cases. Sometimes I get it very wrong. So it's also good for when you are interpreting rude expressions. So not in this case, thankfully. Okay. So complaint, counter complaint, competing and clashing projects. So in a way similar to case one. The client, rather than collaborating, okay, we'll change that, we'll do something about it. She finds something wrong with what the staff member is doing. And in a way, finding something wrong with what the other is doing is always a way in which you can avoid collaborating with them. In all these cases, the staff members are giving instructions, admonishments, sending people off, and clients have a resource for not responding to that by way of finding something wrong with what the staff member is doing. So the staff members' work is really tough because they are under scrutiny all the time, in a way. So what does the staff member do next? No, I'm asking. So she's claiming that she was not complaining, she was not accusing, she was not saying, oh, you don't care. She was asking a question. Now, if we go back and analyze it, it doesn't look like she was asking a question at all, but I won't get into the linguistic analysis of it, but it's fairly straightforward. It was an assertion. Didn't look like a question at all. However, what she's doing, she's kind of trying to delete the complaint, claim that she did not complain in the first place. So in a way, she's changing what she's doing. This is a tricky thing to do. You are going to see that this is going to stop the conflict actually before it emerges. I can't really recommend it as best practice because there's a critical element to it, which is she's not acknowledging the client's analysis of the situation in a way, and she had not asked a question in the first place. So there's by the same time, one thing that she's doing is she's backing off from complaining at the same time. Okay. So you can, obviously, the language is not transparent, but from the tone of voices and the volume, you can start seeing something similar to the very first case with overlaps, raising the volume of their voices, and she challenges the staff member. Then you should ask. And in this way, she's making available her understanding that it was not a question. But if you want to ask a question, then ask a question. And the staff member goes, okay. She admonishes the staff member.
Forse è una domanda, forse non hai capito che ho fatto una domanda, forse non vi dà fastidio che una persona faccia sempre...
And he did said maybe. And she did said maybe, but again, that didn't make it necessarily a question. It was a question anyway, that's what she says. Maybe you did understand that I asked the question. So she's still playing on at the boundary in a way of doing something more accommodating, and complaining again. Maybe you did not understand it. Ask the question. This could be taken as not a complaint. Maybe it does not bother you that sometimes someone always behaves like this, so arrives late in the morning, and yeah, there's a bit of a question mark here. What she does is she raises, she has a final rising pitch, che una persona faccia sempre così, someone always behaves like this, so she frames it as a question by way of a intonation, basically, okay? So she insists that it was not a complaint, it was a question.
All'inizio, quando sono venuta qua, ho detto ma perché lui viene sempre in ritardo? Ma perché lui ormai viene sempre a quest'ora qua? Ho detto ok, io all'inizio mi incazzavo, dopo quando ho visto che...
Yeah, so at the beginning when I arrived here, I said, well, why does he always arrive late? Well, because by now he's always been arriving at this time, so somebody told her he's always done that. And then I said, okay, I used to get pissed, but then when I saw that, you know, it happens, so probably it's not a problem. So what happens here is that she drops the complaint, she answers the question. So now she collaborates with the staff member's project after the staff member has changed her project from accusing to asking a question, and then she's asking the question. This is when they are still disagreeing, there is still tension in the room, but it's not a conflict in terms of accusing each other. There's not a disputations, a acrimonious element, the conflicting element to it has been. So, in a way, the conflict has been sidestepped in this case. So I take it that the staff member in this case spotted an emerging conflict. I think we can say that and try to prevent the escalation. And this is not, none of these are isolated cases. They're kind of representative of patterns I have observed in a lot of data. And there's a number of cases where people try this. They will say, I was just asking a question. I was doing something different anyway. I was not accusing you. It's fairly common. And sometimes it works by accepting this interpretation that Lydia starts to effectively treat it as a question, and there's a bit of an exit from the conflict. So it is possible to backtrack from a complaint if you can spot signs of an emerging conflict and transform in a way a complaint into something less adversarial, another action, a question. Okay, now we have 15 minutes. Would you like to have a bit more time for discussion, or do you want to see one final case? Shall we have a show of hands? How many people want to see the final case? We'll go through. Yeah, okay. I will go through it quickly. Okay, so this is slightly different in a way that, so we started off with people getting into a complaint, people and getting into an escalated complaint, people getting into a complaint and then de-escalating it, people getting on the verge of the complaint and managing to prevent it at the third move. We are going to see a case where people never get into a complaint, but they could have. There is evidence that they could have. But what they do keeps the level of the tension below the threshold of a conflict. Okay, so this is yet another, and these are all different communities. So we have a client, Pietro, a staff member, Cinzia. So you're going to see a scene where they recorded a group in outdoors, basically. They are doing a cycling trip. And the problem in this case, there was that the clients were told off because they were supposed to be cycling this way. At some point they were cycling that way. So she told them off, and all the sequence starts with the client complaining that she did it in that less than nice way. She told them off quite. She was a bit sharp. Okay. But the meeting started off with her asking about what their expectations were for the trip. So they are on a field trip and they are cycling from one place to another, and what their experience has been during the day, which was the first day on the trip. Okay, so this is the scene. This is the staff member. There's a nice environment. You will see birds flying during the film, and this is the client. Okay, let's move quickly.
Dipende, l'unica cosa che sono rimasto un po' titubante, un po' scosso, che siamo partiti e sembrava che non eravamo in grado di riuscire a gestire la cosa da soli, diciamo.
Okay, I'll go a bit quicker here. But stop me if it's not clear. Okay, the expectations were positive. This is to answer the staff member's question. What were your expectations for this trip? The only thing that made me a bit hesitant, I mean, not hesitant, a bit upset, was that we set off in the morning. We started the trip, and it looked like we were not able to manage the situation. It looked like we were not able to manage the situation. So what he's saying it's going to become clear that she was treating them as, children who can't cycle. It looked like. So it's different from the other examples, because the first complaint is downgraded in the first place. He's not accusing her overtly. He's trying to be very, very gentle and very. It's a very hedged complaint in a way, but she asked, what do you mean? People often do this. It was our first case, or what are you talking about? And this is tricky to reply to those questions, because you can end up, accusing the person, and then we know what happens. Okay, I've skipped a bit where Pietro justifies the client behavior. They were a bit, excited about the trip, and so they started the trip. They were a bit too enthusiastic in a way.
Secondo me non c'era bisogno di partire subito così prevenuti nei nostri confronti da parte del
But I think there was no need to be so prejudiced against us from the start. It's an affordance of the Italian language. We tend to use a lot of passive constructions, or at least they are available. It does not translate really well in English. There are ways of doing that in English that are different, but there was no need to be so prejudiced. The passive construction allows him to avoid, telling her, oh, you were prejudiced against us. That's what he's doing. But another client comes in. Okay. I think with prejudiced, what he means is that, so they started the strip, and the very first thing that they did wrong, she came in and told them off. So, and that suggests that she was kind of not well disposed towards them, because, I do something wrong and you come in very sharply. It means that you have a prejudice against us. You have a negative conception of us. And you will find that it is a very common feature of people's complaint. They will not just complain about the action. They will portray the person as malevolent, having, being less than well disposed towards the person. But another client comes in and says, on your part. So he clarifies that this client is talking about the staff member, I think he's saying. So yeah. So we have a complaint. But it's not as bad as in the other examples. It's more gentle. And what she does... So what she could do, having the other cases in mind, what she could do and does not do, she does not go, oh, but you were doing this and that, She does not accuse the client. She goes, but if there is an accident and someone, runs you over, what do I do? So she invokes reasons of safety in a way. She's defensive. She does not acknowledge the client's perspective at all, but she does not accuse the client. This is why they have a big disagreement, but it does not kind of pass the threshold for conflict. And he goes, I know.
Però neanche dire ti mettiamo 2 secondi e tornare indietro, sembra una cosa che...
I know this is the client, but it's not appropriate for you to say, oh, you know, it's just, if you don't behave, we go back. That's what she said, you know. If you don't start cycling properly, we go back to work. We call the trip off, basically. That's what she said. And she goes, she upholds her position. She says, yeah. Okay, so we have a familiar pattern where the client's perspective is not really acknowledged, and so what he does, he just pursues his complaint over and over. And this is how the interaction goes on. And she's behaving defensively, in a way. Oops. So, and she carries on explaining that the staff members have responsibilities for the client's safety, and they were cycling on a road that could be busy at times with cars passing by, but she reassures them that she does not consider the clients incompetent. So responding to that initial complaint that she had a prejudice against them, and then she says, you know, they would not have taken the clients on the trip in the first place if they did not trust them to be competent, to know how to behave properly. And so she reiterates that it's a matter of safety. Does that get her out of the situation? Sorry, I'm doing it wrong. Okay. There you go.
Secondo me non c'era bisogno di partire subito così prevenuti nei nostri confronti.
Sorry, I've done something wrong here. I'm replaying previous part. Something is not playing right. Let me do this manually. A few minutes. Okay, this is the bit.
Quindi se io posso evitare certe cose,
Io ho dato questo qui all'inizio, dopo ho visto che...
perché uno dice delle cose ragazzi.
And they kind of carry on trying to support their own perspective. So if I can avoid certain problems, and he goes, I noticed this at the start, then I saw that, and she kind of interrupts him. I get that, but try to understand why, you know, the reason why I'm telling you these things. So he pursues his complaint. She carries on in the same way, again and again. So she's taking a defensive position in a way, and she's not acknowledged the client's position. So we can see the same pattern in a way of a disagreement, and they're not making progress. They are sticking to their initial position, but the way they did it was different. They did not use reciprocal accusations. So I take this to be evidence that there are different ways of framing criticism. When it's formulated in the shape of, you know, an accusation against someone, that's what makes conflict more likely to arise.
Non vedo perché all'inizio, subito appena siamo partiti, come se ci siamo sentiti, almeno per quanto riguarda me, come se mi sono sentito alzare il dito.
So he reiterates his point over and over. I felt attacked. And he's using the same resource, the Italian passive voice. The alternative would be to say, you attacked us. I felt attacked. He's also framing it as, you know, it was my emotional reaction. It's how I perceived, how I experienced the situation. So he's still refraining from accusing the staff member. Okay, so how it ends is that she suggests that that the clients should try to see that, you know, people care for them rather than feeling attacked. So she does not acknowledge that the client's position, and the client agrees, but he also reiterates that, you know, the way she reproached them was inappropriate. It's what she doesn't acknowledge for some reason. She doesn't go, all right, I take the point, I should have said that in a different way. She doesn't do that. But later the focus shifts because another client starts to speak, and they slightly change the topic of the conversation, and they don't go back to this. And it is a common way in which groups deal with these things. Sometimes they don't resolve them, they change the topic and they suspend them. So this is when conflicts do not emerge. The initial complaint in itself is mitigated as no accusation, and the response does not raise a counter-complaint. However, there is still a lack of alignment that persists when, you know, the complainers, the client's perspective is not acknowledged. Right on time. So evidence from this research so far is that there are early signs of conflicts, and they work through a number of cases. When, for example, when someone does not initially respond and therefore resists criticism, directives, instructions, and they rather focus on a complaint. This is what happened in those cases. So what attitude are you talking about? What do you mean? What escalates the conflict? We have seen that accusations, counter-accusations, and rejecting the other's point of view and getting into that state of clashing projects, a zero-sum game in a way, or interaction. What perpetuates and drags the conflict and disagreement is still failed recognition of the other's perspective. And in some of these cases, it seems that the more they carry on, the less likely it is that they will back off and acknowledge the other member's position. But what de-escalates the conflict is, well, it is possible to recognize the other's perspective, and sometimes it is possible to transform what you're doing into something else, such as an accusation into a less adversarial action, such as a question or advice, proposal. In the other cases I have, and this was me.